In 2014, 5 Finnish men entered the Plura Cave framework, situated in the Palan Valley, Norway, throughout the span of a few frightening hours. Just 3 of the 5 men re-emerged, confronted with the bits of insight of what they saw. These 3 men promised to the spouses of their fallen brethren that they wouldn't leave anybody behind. Plada is the most profound known cave framework in Norway and Northern Europe. Rana is a famous objective for energetic cavern jumpers, yet a large number of the submerged frameworks are not reasonable for human investigation. Few mishaps have occurred in Plada, yet saying this doesn't imply that the cavern framework hasn't taken its reasonable portion of lives. The perceivability is high underneath the surface, yet the temperatures are too twisting during the unforgiving Norwegian winters. The outer layer of Lake Plura freezes over, notwithstanding. The frosty hindrance Plura Grata is available all year to jumpers who wish to overcome the energetic waters. The fame of Plura Grat originates from the bright caverns jumpers go over. Novice plunging specialists frequently jump into the water, fully intent on finding and appreciating the cave prior to getting back to Plura. Exceptionally prepared and inquisitive people might be more disposed to forge ahead with a course that dives them more profound into the limited cavern framework. Jumpers that decide to wander forward are confronted with very tight sections, ice cut temperatures, and completely dark water. In the wake of exploring a sump and underground pocket of water, jumpers will at last climb to the cavern of Steinel Faggot. Around 90 m over the cavern's vaulted roof lies the exit of the cavern, a break in the imploded side of a slope. On February 6, 2014, 2 Finnish jumpers cut a 3-sided opening in the ice at Lake Plura. Prior to slipping into the water, encased in waterproof dry suits and weighty plunging gear, they plummeted rapidly into the inky water. Under 2 hours after the fact, once the silt raised by the principal jumper settled, 3 more men followed behind their companions. The objective for each of the 5 men was Steinel Faggot. The Finnish men had met during an earlier jump of the Oham mine, west of Helsinki. The gathering specially was that there was no assigned pioneer, except for the first to set off was Patrick Gronquist, one of the threesome of balancers who had found the section between the 2 frameworks the year prior. To his dear companion Jari Hinin went with him and was endeavoring to navigate the Steinel. Interestingly, this outing specifically was on the more outrageous finish of the risky game. Most novice jumpers will confine themselves to a half hour to an hour at a profundity of 30 m. Probably this excursion with the guide of submerged bikes would be roughly 5 hours to profundities of in excess of 130 m. The more profound jumpers navigate, the more risky it becomes to explore. The water is colder, and the passages become considerably additional thin. At such profundities, a basic cut from the dagged rough focuses could bring about death. Plunging for this longer profundity like this, the danger of hardware disappointment or hypercapnia. Carbon dioxide harming becomes more prominent. Cavern jumpers use rebreathers, a gadget that falsely retains the carbon dioxide they breathe out. Jumpers should keep their breathing controlled and consistent. If not, the rebreather can be overburdened with carbon dioxide, placing the jumper in a risky position. Hypercapnia can be dangerous. However, even a little case can create turmoil and perplex jumpers. This by itself can have serious results in obscurity. Buckles, around an hour into the plunge, Grank in Heinin had swam through the most profound segment of the framework, which was around 110 m lower than the cavern entrance. Close to this time, Gronquist understood that his companion was no longer with him. Coming back, he found H&N had become stuck in a limited part of the cavern, trapped by a rope associated with his gear. He was utilizing his spotlight to flag his pain to Gronquist. Water end was beginning to overreact, which implied he was in danger of hypercapnia. Gronquist provided his companion with a chamber of gas to assist with decreasing how much carbon dioxide that was entering his framework. Yet while Waterend was exchanging mouthpieces, the most exceedingly awful happened Waterin began to wheeze submerged, filling his lungs with water. To his own shock, Gronis looked as his companion panted frantically for air. Prior to taking, he had watched his companion bite the dust, before his own eyes Gronquist, for dread of kicking the bucket himself, constrained his breathing to slow, in the event that he permitted himself to melancholy. For his companion now, Gronis realized, he put himself in danger for hypercapnia too, after a short snapshot of endeavoring to pull him free without much of any result. Gronquist had no real option except to go on onto Steinel Flagget as planned. Gronquist confronted one more destructive hindrance on course to the surface. Decompression disorder jumpers, who have invested energy in profound water, can't swim directly to the surface without the gamble of decompression affliction. The more profound the plunge, the more drawn out the draught or drought out. Decompression, since Gronquist had spent almost an extra half hour at 110 m. He would need to go through hours making extra stops prior to surfacing securely. He feared the revisitation of the surface, particularly without Haynes' body, until Gronquist realized that the subsequent group will be running over the scene soon to observe her for themselves. Vesa Rainin was the principal jumper of the subsequent group, and the first to find Aerin's body. Ronin needed to go with a choice turnaround now, or endeavor to pass the dead jumper. He in the long run chose to go forward, yet the additional 15 minutes it took to pass the body added 3 hours to Ronin's decompression time. R had to surface 80 minutes ahead of schedule, bypassing a few decompression stops as his oxygen pursued low. Before long surfacing, he started to take note. Torments in his knees and elbows. This was an indication of decompression disorder, frequently called the curve. The aggravation deteriorated throughout the next hours. Gronquist and Ronin would later figure out that while Ronin had been battling to pass their dead companion, Jari Usaki was having inconveniences of his own. The Norwegian police accepted that Usaki overreacted after finding the body and started to overburden his rebreather with carbon dioxide. The fifth and last jumper, Kai Konen, endeavored to help Uzumaki ineffectively. Not at all like Ronin, Konanan concluded it was best not to push through to Steinel's Flagget. Rather, he pivoted and made the long journey back to their beginning stage. Konanan re-emerged during the early hours of the night, almost 11 hours in the wake of embarking for the plunge. When he arrived at the outer layer of Plura, he needed to break a slight layer of ice to move out of the water. Every one of the 3 enduring jumpers were hospitalized with decompression disorder. Neighborhood specialists took proclamations from every jumper and shut the Plura cave during Gronquist's unique navigate of the Plura collapses 2013. Kai Cannon and I. Third colleague Sami Pakarinen went along with him at the hour of the occurrence. Pakarinen showed him making a plunge Mexico. He awakened the following day to 12 calls and messages from the survivors. Parker and had prepared both of the departed and considered them great companions of his, as opposed to instructing that day. Parker and handled a Skype call from an English cavern jumper, Rick Stanton. He was notable for his salvage and recuperation work in submerged caves. Stanton had proactively caught wind of the mishap and was perusing himself to help with the recuperation of the 2 jumpers. In a little while, Norwegian police mentioned the assistance of Stanton. 14 days after the fact, he and 2 different jumpers, John Volin and Jason Misson, set out for Steinel Fogger. It became clear to the 3 men that Waterin couldn't be promptly liberated from the Steinel Flagget side of the passage, and his body was shutting out admittance to Uzumaki. Briefly, the jumpers considered getting back to their starting place and endeavoring to plunge in reverse, yet it ended up being undeniably more hazardous. The recuperation was very unsafe, thus the Norwegian police called it off. As of now, Gronquist made a guarantee to Exari Hernin's better half. Gronquist let the lamenting widow know that he would sort out an answer and take the men back to surface. Even in death, no jumper gets abandoned, and he planned to ensure he maintained that implicit Rulgrank was found not long after that. His companions all had similar thought. They were only sitting tight for the message the 3 survivors, in addition to Bakarin, will be associated with the subsequent recuperation endeavor. The actual mission had been arranged stealthily. The men knew that on the off chance that they asked the Norwegian police for consent, they would be denied admittance. These men enjoyed a somewhat particular upper hand over the English salvage group. However, each of the 4 men had played out the plunge previously and felt certain that they could arrive at their companions' bodies from the Plura side. The main benefit the English group had was the absence of close-to-home association with the casualties inside the cavern. There was no telling the way that the folks would respond getting back to the cavern and seeing their dead companions drifting motionlessly in obscurity water in the month driving up to their flight. Pakarinen and the others attempting to handle their feelings rapidly. They would have rather not terrified under the water and chance one more misfortune occurring in spring 22 2014. A group of 27 jumpers slide in plural, 2 groups of help. Jumpers would work at the shallower levels of the cavern, while Gronquist, Parkin, and Conanon would plunge far beneath to recover the bodies. The Vonin would experience a spinal injury brought about by decompression infection, would go about as the surface chief 3 days after the fact. The bodies, yet again, of Zari Usumaki and Cherie Wateranen were gotten back to the surface. The Norwegian police were satisfied that the bodies had been recovered. However, they let the groups in on that they had disrupted a few norms in the process before very long burial services for the 2 men.